Sweet.
So, I believe we are live, but everyone is saying that they can't see the stream yet. And da 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 da. Hello, everyone. Yes, we are live. So, welcome everyone to the live stream, and welcome Susanna. Thank you so much for being on this live stream with everyone. So if those of you that don't know, Susanna lives in North Carolina. That's correct. And is it the University of North Carolina?
It is University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
At Chapel Hill. And she's doing her PhD in microbiology. And her research is particularly in plant root colonies. Is that correct?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, just correct me if anything I say is wrong. So you did your undergrad in the University of Iowa. Mm-hmm. And then you went straight into your PhD in North Carolina. Okay, awesome. And you also run PH Depression on Instagram, which I'll let you get into later. And you also have your own segment on the Sci Communities YouTube channel called Fresh Press Science. So we have a superstar here, guys. So again, thank you so much for being here. Can you, I guess to start off, can you tell us why you decided to study, from the very beginning, microbiology? Out of all of the options in the world, why did you choose to study microbiology?
Out of all of the ologies, which is a great podcast, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of it, yeah. I also haven't.
It's a good podcast. It's got the weirdest ologies. I heard one about library museums. But so why did I get into microbiology? And I think that it starts way younger, right? When I was in elementary school or even earlier. My dad got his bachelor's in marine biology, and then he was a salesman for a while, but then ended up as a teacher of high school biology. And so I grew up kind of always with this mentor who was constantly telling me to ask questions. And so we'd go to the ocean and we would look at tide pools, and I used to spend the weekends in his biology classroom doing things like dissecting fetal pigs and just these crazy opportunities. And so that was really exciting. And so I knew from a very young age, I liked science. I liked living things. I loved animals. And I thought I would be a veterinarian. Then I decided that's not really what I wanted to do. Knew I didn't want to be a medical doctor. I don't really want to deal with sick patients. I have huge respect for those who do. But
wait, before moving on, why didn't you want to be a veterinarian? What was it that steered you away from that?
So actually, it was the silliest, childlike reason was I learned that you have to put animals down.
Yeah.
And I did not like that idea. So, just silly little reasons. But it turns out, growing up, you always get asked those questions of do you want to be a doctor or a lawyer or, a zookeeper? And I didn't realize until about high school that I could be a researcher. That was an actual job. And I took an AP bio class, so an advanced placement biology class, and we had 2 days that were about viruses and bacteria, and I was just enamored. It was this totally complex world that was everywhere that I hadn't gotten to explore, but apparently we could start exploring it. So from there, I went on to college and did my bachelor's in microbiology with a minor in Spanish, and it was, I've been doing research ever since, and I love microbiology. I could talk about it all the time.
Okay, well, good, because that's what we're going to talk about today. And what about Spanish? Why did you just choose to study Spanish, and are you still doing that, or are you fluent now?
Oh, no. So I chose Spanish just because I liked it. I think that it was important for me to have a balance between what I felt would be my career path and what I just really enjoyed. I was able to do a 10-week study abroad in the Dominican Republic at the end of my freshman year. And it was incredible, and just understanding language and how it shapes how we think and how we communicate. I think has really been helpful, even with doing some of the science communication of like learning foundational building blocks and getting uncomfortable and realizing that you're going to make mistakes. But usually if you try, people really accept you.
Okay. So now you're studying microbiology. We're in Iowa right now. You're studying microbiology. It's a 4-year program?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so from finishing microbiology, like I'm assuming it's a general microbiology major, and then you go into you decide to take a PhD. So firstly, before choosing why you decided to do a PhD, how did you determine that you wanted to study or you wanted to work in plant roots? Like, did you do that in your undergrad, or what was that transition?
That's a great question because it was almost the exact opposite. So in undergraduate, I worked on a bacterial kind of communication project where I was looking at this bacteria called Myxococcus xanthus, and it's a natural soil bacteria. I was working in the lab of John Kirby and had a really great research experience with him. I started working in that lab not really wanting to. I thought I wanted to go into something that was more useful. So I wanted to go into something that was a human pathogen or something that would make us sick. And I got this opportunity to work in John Kirby's lab and kind of express that feeling. And he explained like the things that we're learning in this model organism, this thing that is really interesting. We know a lot about it, but it might not be directly impacting human health. What we learn here is easily translatable or easily taken from this organism to another organism. And we can understand like major concepts. And so that really convinced me to get away from the medical track. When I was applying to graduate schools, though, I really wanted to leave myself open to trying different types of science. So I applied mainly to programs that had what's called an umbrella program.
Okay.
So, yeah, here in the U.S., a lot of the schools in the biological sciences, you go in and you do something that's called rotations. So the first year, you pick 3 different labs to rotate through, and you spend 8 to 10 weeks there doing the science and deciding if you like the lab atmosphere or the topic. So when I came to the University of North Carolina, all I knew is I liked microbiology. I probably wanted to stay in that, but I got to try a bunch of different bacteriology labs, so labs that were focusing really on bacteria. Mm-hmm. And coming to this lab, so now I'm in the laboratory of Dr. Elizabeth Schenk, and I do a lot of work also with someone next door called Jeff Dangle. And my project, even though I show a lot of plants, is really more focused on bacteria interacting with other bacteria on these plants.
Yeah. Okay. So awesome. So then taking a step backwards, why you decide to take that step further and do your PhD? Is it just because you realized that being a researcher was a career path and you were like, okay, this is the next logical step? Is that where you were sort of at in your undergrad, or were you just more curious to learn more science and you were like, oh, I'll figure it out on the way? Or so what was the sort of next step after undergrad?
Yeah. It's funny because there's 2 reasons. One is I just really loved the science, and the idea that I could read and write and do science was really exciting. The other reason is sort of, I don't know what word to call it, but I wanted to be able to have some authority behind what I was saying. I think that there's, we've talked a little bit about differences in being a woman in STEM, and I think there's been several times where my authority has been questioned, and I had this feeling that I could maybe express more of my opinions, and whether personal or professional, and have a little bit more weight behind them if I had a PhD. And so I knew that with the amount of opinions I have, it would be much better if I had some sort of title to back it up. And I think that that's been actually a good driver, because there is kind of a status of being a doctor, and it tells the rest of the world that you've at least tried to get more education, and you've tried to pursue these philosophical questions. And I think, I think there's probably better reasons to do a PhD, and there's probably worse ones, but my reason for staying in the PhD, because I think that that's something that we don't talk about a lot, is that you're constantly faced with the opportunity to leave. My reason for staying is that I think it's really exciting to add new knowledge to the human species. The things that I'm doing, even if they don't end up having an impact on their own, are going to impact other people's studies and are eventually going to change the world around us.
Okay. So 3 points to add if I don't forget them. Firstly, Anik says, Ankit, sorry, Susanna is cool. And he also says, is authority helpful in research?
Yes, absolutely. So there's some good and some bad to it, but definitely labs that have big names behind them. So people who are known to do very good research, people who come from a strong research lineage. So I am the granddaughter of Roberto Coulter because of my PhD advisor. And being able to go to a conference, that's actually kind of a type of currency, is to go up and explain, like, oh, this is who vouches for me. My boss, Elizabeth Schenk, thinks that I should be a scientist, and this person thinks she should be a scientist, and so I'm reputable. So it's a weird heritage thing.
Okay. So to add to your previous point where you said that you have a lot of opinions, as do I, and you felt in order to, I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, just correct me, in order to have those opinions taken seriously or whatnot, having a title behind them gives you more weight. And I also feel like probably most women feel like this. I was actually just talking to someone on my Facebook page today about this, but I feel like sometimes if I'm talking to someone and expressing my opinion, they seem to care more or take me more seriously if they know that I have a degree in mechanical engineering. Like, all of a sudden, whatever she says is not just out in one ear and out the other. And it's unfortunate, I think. I mean, in my opinion, I should be able to speak my mind without needing an entire degree to be taken seriously.
Yeah, well, especially if you're not talking on that topic. I don't know about you, but I've definitely found that if I say I'm working on a PhD in microbiology, suddenly my opinions on food science carry more weight. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, no, I just wanted to add to your point, like, it's unfortunate, but, sometimes I guess, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I already lost my train of thought. It does suck, and I wish it wasn't like that. But yeah, I just wanted to share that I also feel that way sometimes. I wanted to add, you said, oh shoot, my brain is so scattered today after being at work.
I feel like we should tell people what our time difference is too. So what time is it there for you?
So right now it's 7:16, which is 19:16.
Nice.
Yeah, and for you, it's Eastern Standard Time, correct?
Yeah, so it's 1:16 here.
Yeah,
so.
Okay. So I was at work all day, and I just came home, I had dinner, and then I'm like, okay, set up the camera, ready to go.
See, and you're my first thing I mean, I've done some lab work already, but I'm like midday going, so we'll see where I'm at.
So I have you fresh. That's perfect. So I wanted to know more about your specific research topic. Can you go into a little bit more detail about it?
Absolutely.
And and about like its purpose and its applications and like why you think it's important for the world, and if it is.
Yeah, no, I think so. When I did move away from human health stuff, that was still really important, as I needed to know that what I was studying mattered. And I think all science does matter, but just for me, I wanted to have some sort of validation. And so all of our projections predict that we're going to start running out of food to feed our population within the next 50 years or so if we can't increase crop production or increase food production. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is that once the crops are planted, there are so many things that can go wrong that prevent the food from getting to someone's table. There's food spoilage and wastage, but one of the big issues is actually plants getting sick from different fungi or other bacteria, same way that we get sick from those sort of things. And so plants, sometimes what I'll do is I'll say, like, okay, who here has known someone who suffered from this disease? And there's usually one or two. But you can ask the question of who here has eaten food today, and it's everyone. So food stability is going to be a really big issue with the future. And so I think that's why it's interesting to study plant health. And what I got the opportunity to do is understand plant health from the microbiome side. So you might have heard the word microbiome in like a yogurt commercial, or sometimes they talk about the gut microbiome. It basically means the different microorganisms, bacteria, virus, etc., that are living in one ecosystem, one spot. And so I study the bacteria in the plant microbiome. Mm-hmm. And so if you know about probiotics for humans, or like yogurt, we eat that because we think it helps us digest more food, it helps us stay healthy, it keeps digestion going well. Well, plants don't have stomachs, but they have roots. And that's where they take up their vitamins and minerals. And so they have this really complex microbiome, and we found that plants all over the world host different bacteria that kind of live in some sort of symbiosis, if that's sort of the right word, or some at least mutualism. So the bacteria and the plant live together. And what's exciting about this is that the presence of these different bacteria can help the plant grow under different conditions. So drought stress, salt stress, and other pathogens. Again, those fungi and bacteria, if we have the beneficial bacteria on the plant roots, then the bad guys can't affect the plant as much.
Okay. Okay. So
that's sort of the background. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the background. And so specifically, so you're doing, like you said, the program in the States is 5.5 to 6 years, usually a PhD program. And right now you're at your 5th year. That's correct.
Yep.
So in this entire project of microbiomes mm-hmm. that live on plants, is that okay? Microbiomes that live on plants. So specifically, like, can you share, I don't know, not your findings, but I guess sort of like what you've been able, I mean, because as a researcher, I'm assuming like, I'm not speaking properly, but like, can you
some like experiments and things?
Yeah, or like what you found, or like in which ways has your work contributed to what?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the good bacteria, the bacteria that we think help the plants, are collectively known as PGPRs, which means plant growth promoting rhizobacteria, meaning they help the plant and they live in the rhizosphere, or the root of the plant. So all the bacteria I'm looking at are living on the root of the plant, and I'm specifically interested in one bacteria called Bacillus subtilis. And Bacillus subtilis is a bacteria that lives in the soil. So it lives all over the world in the soil. And it forms these really hardy spores, which is basically like the seed version of a bacterium.
Okay.
So it'll form these spores, and it's hard to kill, which is exciting because what we would like to do is take this bacillus that we know can help the plant, and we can put it into fields with the plants and kind of use it instead of an antibiotic treatment, something like that, or an antifungal. And what's exciting is that this has been done in greenhouses, but where my project comes in is that when we try to take this Bacillus subtilis and add it to the plant and put it out in the field, the bacillus does not seem to stick very well. So this treatment program is only effective if bacillus is with the plant and living. And my project is looking at whether or not other bacteria can affect Bacillus subtilis sticking to that plant. And so what I'm really focusing on right now is I have this assay that it's this floating colonization assay. So my plants are grown on a little piece of mesh, and they float around on liquid into which I add bacteria. And I see which combinations of bacteria help Bacillus subtilis to stick to the root and stay on the root.
Okay.
So,
and are you close to figuring it
out?
Yeah,
I think so. It's been interesting because I've definitely bounced around a little bit on different projects. The road through a PhD is never linear, but I think we're looking at hopefully, I've got a goal for this year to submit 2 papers for publication, which is really exciting.
Oh, congrats. I
Yeah,
hope they go through. Yeah.
yeah, me too. No, but I think that a lot of this was assay development, and it's interesting. What I've really found is I'm not working just with one organism. I've got several bacteria plus plants, and trying to keep all of those happy at the same time, it just takes a lot of finessing. And so that's what a lot of my time has been spent on. But now the assay is working really well. I'm excited about it, and I'm starting to get some cool data to share. I've got a talk coming up in a couple weeks just at my department. So I'm trying to frantically get the last bits of data to put that talk together.
Okay. You seem like the type of person that would be able to answer, like, let me know why my mint is dying from bacteria. Because last year I had this beautiful mint plant that I let it grow, and it was huge, and then in 1 week it completely died and it had spots all over it, and I think it's just just from some bacteria. So
it could be some bacteria or some fungus. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'll make sure to send you some photos if this mint doesn't survive. So I wanted to ask you about the PhD. What do you think are some bad reasons to like convince yourself to go in, or like to have in your mind going into a PhD, or some bad reasons to start a PhD? And then also, what are some good reasons for doing a PhD?
Yeah, I think some bad reasons. The worst reason I've heard is just I don't know what else to do.
Okay.
I think that it's really easy, especially in the States where we go from a bachelor's to a PhD directly, or a lot of us do, not everyone, but a lot of us do that. It seems easier to just stay in a degree program. And the truth is a PhD is somewhere between being a student and being an employee. You don't get as many rights as an employee, but you're also given not as much guidance as you would as a regular student. So that being the important thing for like joining, if you're going to join a PhD program, I think it's really important that you really want to be there. And I think it's important that you love what you're studying. So, I wanted to have a little more authority behind what I was saying, but I think if it was just that, if I just wanted that and I didn't care about the project, I probably would have quit by now.
Yeah.
I love learning about microbiology. That's still my favorite thing. I printed out a paper earlier today, and I'm like annoyed that I'm so busy today because I really want to go read this paper. And so you have to be a nerd about what you're studying, because you're going to end up being the expert on your exact project. And so it ends up being a lot of weight. But yeah, I would say that if the bad reasons are because someone else wants you to do it, or because you don't know what else to do. I think otherwise, if you're asking a lot of questions, I think pretty much everyone I know who's doing a PhD program, if someone came to them and asked them questions, they would be thrilled to answer. So.
Yeah, I mean, because for me, I've talked about this on my channel before. I've always been flip-flopping. Like, at first, I really just wanted to go into industry. I didn't want to go into academia, blah blah blah, et cetera, et cetera. I did my research. I did a research project and a thesis for my master's, and I loved it. I loved it so much. I got an internship at a company doing the exact same thing. I don't like it as much. And I don't want to go into academia, but I really want to be a researcher. Like, I want to, maybe I'll just be a postdoc forever. Maybe I'll have my own lab one day. But for me, I want to do a PhD simply because it's a paid job. Yep. And I'm going to be doing research that I love. So that is sort of my reasoning for it. And that's great. Okay, good.
No, I mean, all I'm hearing you say is like you take it seriously as a job and you want to do the work. And I think that is the best reason to do a PhD.
And I also feel like I'm saving my professor from hiring someone that doesn't want to do the work. And I'm just like, you're welcome. You can give me the money.
Your own advocate.
Yeah, basically. So you also run, Someone asked a question here. I'm pondering between going straight for a PhD or to do a year or two in industry and then do a PhD. So what do you think? Why didn't you do any industry work, and why did you go straight into a PhD?
Good question. So I think if I'd had the chance again, I would actually probably take a year or two to work. I don't think it would have cost me anything, and I think it would have helped give motivation to me in the harder times, and also to feel like I had a choice. I certainly had a choice on doing a PhD, but there's, 2 or 3 years into the PhD, I was like, is this really what I want to do? And I didn't feel like I would be able to do any other job, really. And so I think knowing that I had another job I could go do would have made it more clearly a choice for me. My feeling, what I've heard from other people too, is that if you're not sure, do something else. You can always start a PhD. And I think most programs like to see that you have a diverse background. So I think that's pretty much my advice. I think it's always, the more experience you have going into a PhD, I think the better and the faster that PhD is going to go. And so investing a year doing something else, you might still graduate at the same time, but given an extra year of expertise somewhere else.
And I 100% agree with you. Like, you can always do a PhD. And this is really the difference. Maybe you can also add to this, the difference that I've found from living in North America and living in Europe. Like, in North America, or I don't know, maybe it's different in the States, at least in Canada, I've found that everything is very high paced. It's sort of like, even if you go to industry or to an interview or whatever, and it shows that you did your degree in 5 years for a 4-year program. So my program was actually 5 years because I did it in Quebec, and they have grade 13, blah, blah, blah. It's complicated. I won't get into it. But basically, my program was 5 years, my undergrad program. And companies are always like, why did it take you an extra year to do it? There's this it's always like, you should be doing it at the same time as everyone else. There should be no reason for you to take the time off, blah, blah, blah. It just seems like there's this pressure to finish everything really fast and to like start your job, start your life. Have everything complete and have everything figured out. Whereas here, companies find it weird if you don't take a year off. So it's a very big difference that I found here. Basically, you aren't expected to finish your degree in a certain amount of time. Instead, they give you like 6 or 7 years to finish a bachelor's. They're like, in these 7 years, you have to be done with the bachelor's, but you have all of that time to do it, and we don't care how long it takes you, which I found really cool. And I actually think it's a lot better because, in reality, what is the rush? To me, at least. You have your entire life to do a PhD, hopefully, and that's just the way I look at it. So I don't know if you also see that in North America, everything is sort of high-paced, or...
Definitely. I think actually University of North Carolina, I didn't know this until recently, but for their undergraduates, you have to petition to take more than 4 years to get your degree.
Okay.
I managed to get out in 4 years from Iowa, but I did that because I was able to take advanced placement classes in high school. And had I not been able to get a bunch of my credits done before I went to college, it would have been very hard for me to do research, a major, a minor, and a study abroad. I don't think I could have done all those things. And I think having to petition to take more time would really deter me from doing those things which have been so foundational in my life. There's a handful of classes that I took that I feel like really impacted me, but more than anything was the study abroad trip, the research, the conferences I got to go to, and that wouldn't be possible if I was really pressured for time. So that's cool that Europe is different.
Yeah, it is, and I actually really appreciate like how everything is laid out here. But you just mentioned you had some very impactful classes. What were some of your favorite classes that you've taken that have really impacted you?
I think one of my favorite classes was biochemistry. So I took 2 semesters of biochemistry, and I loved that because I was always really split between, I had to take a bunch of chemistry classes for my major, and I basic general chemistry I really didn't like. Organic chemistry was really tedious to me, and I had this feeling of like negativity towards chemistry. And then on the other side, I love my biology and my micro classes. And biochemistry was the first time where I really appreciated the importance of chemistry in biology. And I think that's one of the things that's been most surprising to me, is that microbiology is a lot of studying cells and microbes and communities, but it's also a lot of chemistry. A lot of the stuff that we're understanding is that bacteria are talking to each other using these different chemicals, and the structure of those chemicals is important for what they're able to say to each other. It's like their own language. And so I'm glad that I had that experience with biochemistry to start appreciating something that I would never guessed would be so important to my life.
Someone in the live chat just said Jess hates chemistry, though, which is true because I hate chemistry. But, you know, it's interesting. I also like these sort of crossover topics. I mean, right now I'm doing something that I really didn't think I would ever be doing. I'm doing a lot of advanced thermodynamics, which is basically just statistical chemistry, which I love. And I think it's really cool. But it's not just like the periodic table. But I mean, is chemistry ever just the periodic table?
Yeah, no. I used to date a chemical engineer, and he's a sweetheart, but he would talk about thermodynamics, and I was like, shush, don't care.
I wanted to ask you about your pH Depression Instagram account. So can you explain what it is and how you were motivated to start this?
Sure. So pH Depression, I started it at the end of this March, and it's grown pretty quickly. It started just on Instagram.
Oh, that's it already?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy. Yeah, so it went from Instagram to Twitter, and then we got a few more people on the team, and now we have a website, and we're just keeping building. But basically, our vision is that we want to have a place online where people can come together and kind of commiserate or just conversate of the topic of mental health in academia. Mm-hmm. So it's called pH Depression, but we talk about depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, borderline personality disorder, just general anxiety, all of these different things. And what has been really inspiring about it is seeing people connect through stories all over the world. It's a very international group. But it was meant to be a place to say, okay, we see these really happy faces all the time, whether it's in academia or on social media. And what if we had the picture of the person looking like themselves, looking happy, and then some of their story behind it, and what you might not appreciate, especially in situations that don't really want those stories to come out. I think in academia, we have this need to kind of hide our flaws and our insecurities and validate everything. And there's definitely a stigma against people with mental illness. And so my motivation is that I do deal with clinical depression. And the reason why I start this page was that about 2.5 years ago, I was having a really hard time. I had a pretty rough year, and I got through it thanks to family and friends. I have a therapist. I took care of myself, but it was really difficult. And when the Nature Biotech paper came out at the start of, I think it was March and April, I think it was March, start of this year, that showed about 40% of graduate students, PhDs and master students, deal with anxiety and depression. And I was like, oh, I'm not alone, but where is everyone? Where is everyone who feels this way? So yeah, it started then, and it is taking off. It's been incredible. The people I'm meeting through it are the best people.
You know, the one thing that I really love about Instagram and also Twitter and all of the different, like the different science communities, is I feel like we're a lot more real than, I mean, just the typical Instagram influencer that you see, like, you know, they have the super white room with like flowers and like everything is clean, and I'm just like, I have a kayak in my room and another kayak right there, and there's no AC, and I'm tired and everything. And I really like how we're really real, and we are super supportive. And that's the other thing that I really like about our community, is that We are super supportive. I think I've found that a lot more in science than in other communities that I'm part of. Like, I'm part of a really big sports community. But yeah, kayaking, as I just said.
That's amazing. How long have you been doing that?
Like a decade or 15
Wow.
years or something like that. Yeah.
That's so
Yeah, it's pretty fun. I get to do it in Switzerland now, which I really like, and I have friends here, but just through kayaking, and because everyone has moved away now after their master's degree. So, yeah,
fascinating.
it's great. But like, I really appreciate our science community. I appreciate like the rawness behind all of the posts, and that's also what you're trying to do, or what you're doing through your Instagram. So you are just feeding our great community. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's awesome.
And you're also doing, as I mentioned before, fresh pressed science on the Sci Community YouTube channel. So can you explain to everyone what that is, and also, yeah, I guess what a journal club is?
Yeah. So that has a funny history. So basically, Gabi Serrato Marx and I connected through PH depression, and we followed each other's personal accounts and started talking. And she was actually we started talking because I said something kind of inappropriate in one of my stories, and she was really sweet and called me out and was like, "Hey, this isn't cool." And I it was something that I really hadn't thought through very well, and she was absolutely right, and I was really thankful to her. And we started talking, and it came about that she was like, I want to do something. I want to do something with science communication. What could we do? And we got on this idea of doing a journal club. And so to answer your question, a journal club is basically usually in a lab or in a science, or like a science setting, or in a classroom. You'll pick a journal article, so a paper that has been peer reviewed. Other scientists have said this is science, this is a good paper, has been published, and then you read it as a group and you try to understand what the authors were saying, if you agree with the figures, and what you can take away from that paper pertaining to the topic as a whole. And so we started talking about this idea, and we realized, wouldn't it be cool if we could talk about science that we don't know anything about, and show, because we hear a lot people saying, especially other scientists saying, well, if the public wants to understand something, they should just Google it. And we wanted to challenge that idea. Both Gabi and I are trained science communicators and scientists. And even we've done 2 episodes, we're doing a third tonight. We've done one about chronecrophilia that was 2 weeks ago, and we did one with like neuroimaging. And so those are both up on the Sci Community YouTube. You can watch those. We're doing the next video tonight. I will be hosting the Sci Community Instagram Live at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then Gabi and I, so I'm going to be talking to, her name is Rebecca at RC Stat. And she's going to be talking to us about data analysis of antibiotic resistance programs. And just this opportunity to connect with people who are actually writing the papers, but then to show the scientific community and the general population, science is hard. It's hard to understand. You have to put in more effort than you realize. And so we need to be responsible as scientists for communicating our science, for reaching out to the media, and before it gets taken out of turn, explain as best we can what is going on to the general population.
Okay. And so I'll make sure, to everyone that's watching the live, I'll make sure to link the event for this Fresh Pressed Science live stream. I'll make sure to link it in the description below after this live stream is done. So when you're doing, they're live, right? Okay. So are you sort of also, is it just you and Gabby, or is there a way that you guys invite, like, do you tweet about it and you invite everyone to read the paper, and then, or how does it work?
Yeah, so that's one thing we are kind of struggling with. I think that we do need to tweet out the paper in advance. And maybe, I'm going to put a note, I'm going to do that today, tweet out paper.
Yeah, that would be really cool, so that
Yeah.
if anyone watching the live right now, if because maybe you can explain this a little better than me, but when I was telling Susanna before we started that when I was doing my bachelor's at McGill and I was doing my bachelor's thesis, we were also part of a journal club. And basically it's just like, as Susanna said, it's just like a book club, but what you do is that usually you pick a journal within your research field and you guys discuss it. But as Susanna said, they're going to be picking something that is completely outside of their field to sort of challenge the idea of, basically I'm just repeating what you just said. I just want to make sure everyone got that. But people in the chat are asking, what's the name of the YouTube channel? So it's the Psi Community. So I'm going to type it into the chat. So
that sounds good.
The YouTube channel name is the Psi Community. But it would be cool if people want to practice.
Yeah, we'll check it out. So we are on Twitter at Fresh Pressed Sci, SCI.
Okay.
So yeah, Fresh Press Sci on Twitter, and I will tweet that out as soon as we're done talking. I have the paper, and we have some figures that could be really helpful to people. So we'll tweet that out. And then we get together. So I will be doing a live Instagram interview with the first author of that paper, Rebecca, on the Psi Community at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today. And it is, so this is sort of just a challenge for me as far as being live. I love doing science communication. I do it locally through a planetarium. I also train other people to be science communicators, and I think the science
Maybe behind... you can train me so I can be better at interviewing people.
I think you're doing great. I think I'm having a great time. I think as long as both people are having fun. Yeah. But I like to do that stuff. So this was just sort of the next challenge of, can I do this digitally and can it still be informative? So I think it's been going well. We've been having fun. We've been getting good feedback, but we are always very interested in more feedback. So if anyone has comments on my performance here or, on the Fresh Press Science or anything else on my own Instagram page, definitely send them over. I love, constructive criticism. I think it's great.
And so is this a weekly or a bi-monthly live stream or?
Well, that's actually, I'll make a little pitch here too. We are looking for more people. And so the more people to interview, and the requirement is that you have to be an author on the paper that we're discussing. It doesn't have to be an exciting, flashy paper. Trust me, we can make it exciting and flashy. I have a big personality, will be obnoxious. Gabi will try to keep me under control. But we are looking for people who have been an author on a paper that we could talk to on the Instagram Live. We would like to do it once a week. It's usually Thursdays at 8 p.m. But our biggest roadblock right now is getting more authors, and especially we've had, this will be our third woman in a row. We'd love to hear from some men. We'd love to hear from more people of color, anyone who's representing different groups from different areas. It's mostly started from just people that I know through the internet system, but if you or anyone you know thinks of someone who has in the last 5 years been an author on a paper, would be willing to talk with us, would love to do it once a week.
Okay. Do you have to be first author?
Nope.
Okay. I'm second author on a paper, and I'm waiting for another one to be approved, so to be a first author approved. So yeah, I'm second author.
I think that totally counts, because I mean, if you're an author on a paper, you should be able to talk to it a little bit. So, and especially at the level we're doing.
I would have liked to argue to be first author. That's how passionately I feel about it. But my supervisor, I'm a master's student, her PhD, so. But I could definitely talk about it. Let's do it.
That whole authority thing.
Someone asked as a joke, are fictional authors allowed? Probably not.
Fictional authors. I'm guessing that means authors of fiction, but now I'm like...
Oh, I think that's what they meant. So, wrapping things up, I wanted to ask you, do you have any advice for anyone that wants to pursue microbiology? Like, if they wanted to pursue, in your footsteps, doing a PhD in microbiology, what would be, the number one advice that you would give, if you could give one piece of advice?
my number one piece of advice would be to work in a lab, hands down. So I think that even if you start out as a dishwasher, or even if you start out in a lab you don't think that you'll really like, if you like your mentor, if you like the group, that's what really matters. So reach out, no matter what level you're at. You can be in high school, you can be in middle school, and if you're excited about it, reach out to like the student services at a university, or honestly, Twitter is a great way to communicate with scientists, where a lot of us academics are on Twitter. You can go through and look for people in your area who are doing what you like and send them a message and say, hey, I'm really interested. I'd love to get some lab experience. And just be pushy, because a lot of times I just forget emails. But just getting into a lab, seeing what that means if you really like it, I think is so important, because you might do it and find out it's not really your thing, or you might start and, sort of like what happened with me, just have that take you on the rest of your life. So definitely get into a lab, start talking to other scientists.
Thank you. That is really good advice. I think I would also agree. I always tell students that ask me what advice I would give, and I always say either an internship or lab work, or something like grades are great, but in the end, I think having more diverse training is a lot more important. So I want to wrap things up, but some people have asked some questions, but I don't think you can answer them. But I just want to acknowledge the fact that I am seeing people's questions here, because I don't want people to think I'm ignoring them. So someone asked, what do you think about the future of antibiotics? What changes would happen with antibiotics in the nearest future?
I got all excited because I'm going to give you the worst answer ever, which is that you should tune in tonight, because we're going to talk about antibiotics. And I have lots of feelings. So we're talking data science, but I know a lot about actual antibiotic resistance. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit tonight.
Okay, sweet. Okay, thank you so much, Susanna. I really enjoyed talking to you. I feel like I learned so much about microbiology, and now I have a friend that I could ask questions when I have bacteria growth on my plants.
Perfect.
So thank you, everyone, for joining into the live stream, and hopefully Susanna and I will talk again together soon. Thank you. Ciao. Or sorry, I mean bye.
I'll take ciao.
Okay.
Bye.